Yo guys! It's your friend here, bringing you another awesome Naruto What If tale. Today we are gonna see what if Naruto gains all 9 Bijuu and the ultimate Sharingan Part 1. Subscribe if you enjoy the video. Let's start the story. The Cages and the Elemental Nations lost the fight against the fully revived Madara Uchiha, and now he and Sasuke were performing the ritual to seal the final Kai Ruby into the seal and revive the Jubi so Madara can become its host and rule the world. 9 ethereal dragons came out of the demon statue Jitomazo and headed for the unconscious form of Naruto Uzumaki Namek. As when they wrap around the blonde's body they form into an orb and Naruto floats into the air. Madara smirks behind his mask while Sasuke smiles evilly. Also Zuma shall have the power of the Jubi and the world will be mine. Madara says, in the end you have failed, now the world belongs to the Uchiha Clan like it should have in the beginning. The prick says and chuckles evilly. They started the process and the demon statue started to act up and tremble. The chakra coming out of the dragon turned white and star started to reverse itself, shocking Madara and Sasuke. What's going on here? The founder of Konoha yelled while Sasuke kept looking at the scene in shock. Madara narrowed his Sharingan eye on the blonde and noticed a smirk on his face. He then saw Naruto mouth a word with his lips and Madara's eyes widened in horror when he realized what he said. Fool, no, he couldn't have. Sasuke stopped them. He yelled out in fear while Sasuke looked at him like he's crazy. Why? We are close to obtaining the ultimate power. Madara, so why are you? He was cut off by his ancestor, releasing a blast of murderous intent upon his only surviving relative. Don't be stupid, he's placed a power on himself that will the effects of the sealing. We must stop it, Madara declared, until the reversal in the chakra started to move faster and faster until a black vortex formed around the seal on his stomach and the chakra of the other tailed 8 beasts started to get sucked into the vortex. Vidara's eye widens even more when he sees what's happening. All the effort and planning he made throughout the years in order to make the world of his control with the power of the original Bijuu and the power of his ancestors was all thwarted, and by a mere child his eyes glowed in anger and rage and he grits his teeth in fury. No, my plans, that damn Dozumaki has ruined my plans. He yells out and tries to cancel them by forcing his chakra into the ritual, but it doesn't work and he curses Sasuke helped me stop a jutsu. He yells out, getting a nod from the teenager. He adds his chakra to cancel that, but it fails and something else happens. He notices his hands fading away and being stretched and drawn to the vortex. The wind directing to the vortex grows stronger and Sasuke's eyes widen in horror as he is drawn into the CWH. What's going on? I'm being drawn into the vortex, he says, and tries to pull himself away using his chakra only to be drawn in faster. No, this can't be happening, this can't be happening, damn you, damn you, he cries out as his head and the rest of his body stretches out and gets sucked into the vortex. Madara saw this and the same thing was happening to him. Naruto started to chuckle and then Ow! As this was happening he trembled in fury and glared at the blonde with every single ounce of hatred he could muster. Damn you, Hashirama and Uruzumaki brethren, damn human autonomicus and your family for ruining my ambitions. I will not die like this. I am immortal, I am an Uchiha, I am Gu. He screams out in denial as he is sucked into the vortex while the multicolored chakra continues to enter the vortex that was on Naruto's stomach. Naruto's mindscape. He opened his eyes to the familiar blood-red walls, but inside the cage was a rather house surrounded by grass and wildflowers. It wasn't overly big like that of a mansion, but it had 2 stories and had a lot of room. They looked around and noticed the lake, river and waterfall behind the house and foxes running around yipping. He smiled and shook his head at this. The Tomi-chan he called, waiting for the reedy to walk out of the red house. The door soon opened and the sight made his eyes go wide. The woman with blood-red hair walked out of the house with no shoes on, leaving her feet out for the world to see. Her toenails were painted blood-red and they wriggled as they walked through the green grass. His eyes traveled around her bod. And he looked at her sleek and smooth legs that curled up her body and hid themselves away under a mini skirt. Her skirt was a red-orange color and it went up to her curvy waist. Her black shirt had a red 9-tailed fox on it and it fit her glass figure perfectly and it showed off her bust, which Was a nice size but not too big. Her arms swung at her sides as she walked, the nails painted black and red. As she sauntered over to him, he can clearly see the muscles, which were lean and increased to her feminine appearance. His eyes traveled from her torso to her slender pale neck and ivory skin that was light and soft. It would make you want to kiss it. As she approached the blonde, he looked into her ruby red slit eyes and his expression went from happiness to sadness and sorrow. Hitomi Chandai, he starts to say, until she puts her finger on his lips to silence him, smiling sadly at the young sage. I no Naruto come, but it is the only way. If there was another way I would have found it, but sadly I'll end up being one with the other also, and you will be the new Jubi in a way because you'll have its power. We've also gained both Madara's and Sasuke Sharingans as well as their abilities. When you absorb their souls into yours, you also have the eternal Manju Sharingan, and the DNA of the Akia clan is now part of you. Once you absorb the other 8, and then me, I'll be no more. She finishes and looks down at the ground and notices droplets falling on the ground. She looks up and sees Naruto's shoulders shaking and tears falling from his face in anger and sorrow. It deeply hurt her to see her lover in such a state and that this has happened to him, but it had to be done, otherwise the world would have ended under the rule of Madara for all eternity. Be damn it, this isn't fair. First my F.A. Miley, then my friends, my godfather and godmother, and now you. Why Kami, why do you always take away those I love? He chokes out in sorrow. Hitomi pulled him into a hug while he sobbed into her shoulder and she rubbed his back and stroked his hair. I know Narukan, I know life can be cruel to even those who don't deserve it. I'm sorry, I want you to know that I love you too. And she started to fade and Naruto's eyes widened in fear as he looked at her while more tears fell from his eyes. She smiled at him while tears also fell from her eyes. Goodbye. She fades away into a shower of sparkles. Naruto falls to his knees as the house forest and everything else fades away and he's left into a black void. Naruto looks at the darkness with his hair shadowing his eyes. He then clenches his fist so tightly that his knuckles pop and blood seeps through his fingers. He then draws his head back and lets out an agonizing scream while tears flew from his face. Outside his mind, the by Hitomi-chan, he whispered as tears fell from his face as he continued to absorb the rest of the chakra. After that, the demon statue turned to sand and dissolved while Naruto fell to the ground and hit it with a thud. He then opens his Ruline slit blue eyes and looks up at the dark cave. He then slowly gets up but then feels a huge amount of pain in his eyes and clutches his face. He rolls over onto his knees and starts to shake cake while a black horse surrounds his body. It then goes from black to rainbow colored and it flares Aru. ND the trembling cave. He then smashes his fist into the ground creating a small crater and then does it a few more times making the crater bigger every time. He then revers his head back and then lets out an earth-shattering yell and a large pillar of multicolored chakra shoots out of his body and ears through the cave. It shoots up into the cloudy sky and causes it to slowly clear. He collapses and pants heavily while sweat drips from his face. He then slowly gets up and opens his eyes. They were now red and it had a 6-bladed windmill shuriken, but a small hexagonal star shape was on the inside of the shuriken. Naruto walks over to a small pond of water and looks down at it to see his eternal Manju Sharingan reflect off the water. Well, Madara team, I guess I have to thank you and Sasuke for these eyes. He then feels the knowledge from Madara's and Sasuke as well as the abilities of their Sharingan go through his mind. After that, he focuses his eyes and finds himself being warped out of the cave on a hilltop. A pair of black sandals appear, then black cargo pants and a dark green flak jacket, and the Yandam's cape appears. After that, a masculine face and wild spiky blonde hair appear. Naruto DS himself standing on the hilltop while looking at the destroyed and ruined environment and sighs sadly. If only I knew a way to prevent this from happening, he says, but then realizes something and smirks. He focuses his eyes and says only one word, Pamui. He says the sky turns into ripples and a human IZED vortex appears in front of him. He then jumps into it and the vortex disappears. Dimensional vortex. Naruto is now flying through the multicolored ripples and lights and his eyes are squinting from the flashes. Naruto then starts to feel funny and his body starts to twist and turn and then it starts Ts to get all wavy as if it was changing. He then sees a flash of white light and is consumed by it, as does everything else. Everything else becomes white and Naruto blacks out. After being out for a while he hears a feminine yet young voice and Nikki the voice calls out. Naruto lets out a groan. And when a body jumps on his torso and Nikki wake up, it yelled again. Naruto then opens his eyes slowly and his vision was blurry. At first the face he saw was barely visible, but he did see red hair, but his vision becomes clear. He sees the face of a girl who seemed to be 6. She had the same blue eyes as him, but her hair was red and it stopped to her back. She was wearing a red shirt and black pants. Naruto blinks at her for a while and the redeemed raises her brows. And Nikki, she asks, and that's when Naruto screamed in her face and she jumped off his waist and fell off the bed, hitting her head on He ground. Naruto jumps up and looks around frantically. Where the heck am I? He yells out as he sees he's in a large room and not that filthy apartment. He then looks at his hands and gasps. He jumps off the bed and lands on the ground and runs to a mirror that was on a dresser. He looks at himself and his eyes nearly bulge out of his head. He was 6 years old again, but this time he looked like his father. The reedy gets up, rubbing her head in pain, and glares at a brother and Nikki. What is your problem? Why did you do that? She demands. Naruto turns around and sees the reedy who was walking towards him. She then stops and crosses her arms while staring at her brother. Naruto again stares at her and points a finger at her. Who he asks, and the girl looks at him in shock. What do you mean? Who am I? I'm your twin Shinku, she yelled at him while Naruto jaw dropped. But I have a sister, a twin sister. But how? He thought while Shinku just puffs her cheeks up at him. How could you forget that we're siblings? Yubaka, she wanted to know. Naruto stopped contemplating on this and decided to act differently now, so he rubbed the back of his head in embarrassment. Sorry, I didn't recognize you, Amato. I'm still waking up from my nap, he lied, but was inwardly sweat dropping as Shinku gave him a look of suspicion but then shrugs. That was when they heard the door downstairs slam open and the two ran down the hall and saw Kushina walk in the house with a pissed off expression. She was wearing a red and black CK ninja outfit with a green flak jacket on. Her long red hair was tied into a ponytail and strapped to her back was her okatana. Naruto's eyes widened when he saw her mother and couldn't help but smile due to the fact that she was alive at this time. Shinku was the first to come downstairs with Naruto following her. Kashima removes her sword and sits down on a black couch, rubbing the temples on her face. She then mumbles about those bastards on the council, and here is enough growing a backbone and dealing with him. Ever since Minato died and Kushina became the head of the Namikas and Uzumaki clan, the civilians and elder council have been demanding that she hand the boy over to be executed or turned into a weapon, but today they went too far. The elders and civilians were demanding that Kushina have her son and daughter become a breeding factory when they turn 15 so that the two clans can be revived for the good of the village. And the moment they said the Kushina killed 4 of the civilians with her sword, and after beating Danza within an inch of his life, she ripped her headband off her head and threw it at Harrison, stating that she quit and she's retiring from the ranks and taking her children and everything Minato left to her and their children, as well as everything her clan created, out of the village. Pearson and the clan council tried to reason with her, but she told them to piss off and left, but not before warning Saratobi that if he even thought about stopping her, she'd reduce half of the ninja population. She then felt 2 tugs on her pant legs and saw Naruto and Shinku looking at her. She smiles at the men, ruffles their heads. Kasan, are you okay? Naruto asked his mother. She looked at them both and gave them each a warm and loving smile. Hey, you two, go to your rooms and go pack your things, we're leaving Konoha, she instructed, and Shinku's eyes widened, as did Naruto's. Why, Kasan? Naruto asks, and Kushina's sighs, because you two are not safe here anymore. Now go on, your godfather will be here soon, she says in a nod. Naruto was confused at first but then realized that his timeline was different from the original, so he and Shinku went upstairs to pack up their things. 3 hours later the house was now empty and Kushina had 3 large scrolls on her back. One was black, the other was red, and the last one was blue. Naruto and Shinku were wearing the same thing, and Their packs on their backs. Bashina then takes each of their hands, and when they exit out of the compound gates a puff of smoke appears, and when it clears a new Akami, and Miko appear in their Anbu masks. Bashina narrows her eyes and stares at them, reaching for her sword until Inu waves his ND in front of her. White Kushina-sama the Hokage didn't send as he replies while the other three nod. The Shina stares at them for a moment and removes her hand from her sword, getting a sigh of relief from them. So why did you four come here? Kushina asks. Kakashi removes his Inu mask and speaks up. We want to leave with you Kashina-sama, he replies, getting a shocked look from her. May I ask why? Kakashi Kishina asks, and the copying in size. Well, you see, Kashinayu and Minato-sensei were like a mother and father to me since my parents died, and I think of Naruto and Shinku as my and I promise and say, if anything were to happen to him or you, then I'd look after them, and if I have to become a missing man to make sure they're safe, then I will, he says. And Kushina looks at Akami, who nods and removes her mask, revealing Rin's face. Same here Kishina-sama, Rin said while Nico and removed their mask. Revealing Yugao and Anko. And why do you two want to join? Kushina asks her former students. To be honest, sensei, I am also tired of how the villagers in Konoha treat Naruto-kun, and I don't wish to protect a village that would dishonor the dying wish of the man who saved us from absolute destruction. Female user says. The Shina looks at Anko and she also speaks up. You already know my reasons, she says, and rubs her left shoulder blade. Kushina looks at them for a while, then smiles. Very well, you all may join us, but where is your equipment? She asks, and Kakashi smiles. I sealed them up and pack in a ND. The pack took them back to the some limiting realm, he answers. Oh well, let's go. Jerry is waiting for us at the west gate, she ordered, and they nodded. Kakashi picks up Naruto and places him on his shoulders, and Rin does the same with Shinku. They managed to make it out of the west gate and are now NNING on the path until a puff of smoke appears and a horse-sized toad that was black and red is seen on the path. They all stop when they see the frog, and Kushina smiles. About time you showed up, Yuria, she says, and that's when a man with long wild spiky hair appears on the toad's head with a grin on his face. Well, if it isn't Kushina and her caucus. Naruto eyes twitches at being called a brat, but then a smirk appears on his face. Hey Erosena, he says out loud, getting gasps from the four former Anbu and causing Jiraiya to fall off the tote the Shina had to hold in the laugh, and Shinku was laughing. Jian pointing a finger at her godfather, who got up with an angry expression on his face. Don't call me that in public, he yells, and Naruto on the grins. Jiraiya calms down and looks at the other four. Hey Kushina, why are they with you? He asks, and Kushina shrugs. They wanted to join me, now we need to just find a village. Iowa is definitely out of the question, and Sana is allied with Konoha. Kiri is still in the middle of a war, and the minor countries aren't strong enough to handle Konoha right now, so my only option is Kumo. What do you think of Jiraiya? Kushina asks. Andrew Ray rubs his chin and thought I say Kumo is our best option. They are neutral to Konoha and they also have two containers like Naruto, but the thing is that they treat them like guardians instead of pariahs. They also happen to be related to the wreckage, with one being his younger brother and the other his niece. I believe the girl is the container of the Navy no Nekomata, and his brother contains the Hachibi Nushi, he answers, and her eyes widen in shock. I see, well, it is now, let's go. I don't want to stay here and wait for that Warhawk to send his drones after us. Hawago pulls out her ninjutsu and vanishes, shocking everyone, and then he sound of two slashes and screams are heard, and she reappears with a bloody sword in her hand and swipes the blood away. We have to get out of here and fast, she says, and Kushina curses. You four get Naruto and Shinku out of here, she yells, and they nod and shunts in a way. The toad disperses and Kashin pulls out her al-katana as she and Jerry were surrounded by 20 root ninja who hid their blades drawn. Where is the demon brat and the girl? The leader demands, but instantly regrets it when a murderous grin forms on Kushina's face and Jiraiya cracks his knuckles as that crippled old fool serious Sendi. Only 20 of you to deal with us, I'm insulted, he complained. I'm gonna enjoy carving you fools up, the redhead says, and then charges at the soon-to-be dead breed Anbu border of Hai no Kuni and Kaminari no Kuni. The Kashi Rin, Anko, Yugao, Naruto and Shinku were waiting at the border for Kishina and Jiraiya. The twins were sitting under a tree and Shinku was sleeping on her brother's lap. Naruto was resting his head on the tree with his eyes closed and was in his mindscape. Naruto is now the same as he was when he was in the future. He walked up to the cage and sensed a powerful aura coming from on the other side. That was when a pair of large red slit eyes opened. From the opposite side is a pair of long white sharp teeth and the figure growled. What are you doing here? Yanden Kyubi no Yoko roared out while the entire place shook violently. Naruto simply stood there staring at the vixen BEF. A small smile formed on his face. Sorry to disappoint you, Hitomi-chan, but I am not my father. Naruto answers. Her eyes widened in shock because standing before her was her vessel and not Monodynamicus, the man who sealed her way like Hashirama and Mito did. But what surprised her the most was that he knew her name, since no one short of her creator father figure ever called her that. She narrows her eyes in suspicion for a bit before her entire body glows and she is now in her hybrid form. Naruto walks up to the cage and looks into her ruby red slit eyes. Care to tell me how you know my name, my dear vessel? She questioned. Naruto's smile grew and proceeded to roll up his right sleeve. Hitomi watched as a series of complex seals formed around his forearm and into the palm of his hand. While a spiral appeared around his palm, he reaches for the paper that said seal on it and rips it off, revealing a low CK to the gate, and then pulls up his shirt showing the shaky few and pattern on his stomach as blue chakra flames form on the tips of his fingers. He places his hand around his torso and twists it counterclockwise, resulting in the lock clicking and slowly unlocking until the gate split apart and open up. The vixen remained stunned beyond belief as she witnessed her vessel free her from her seal, unaware of Naruto, who reaches out and places his hand on her face, and she tenses up at the contact but then calms down and purrs when he strokes her right ear. The simply put it hit him. Chan, I am not from his time and am from another realm like this, only it was destroyed by the man who used you to fight Shotting and my father, he says, and feels her release a lot of kai in his mind. Vidarichia, I swear if I ever see that man I'll rip him apart, she snarled in anger. Naruto approaches her angry form and ulls her into a hug, making her freeze up from the contact since she had never experienced this form of contact once in her life. What are you doing? She questioned, startled at the physical contact, only for Naruto to pull away and his gaze met hers. She was baffled by the amount of emotions she could see emitting from his eyes, ranging from happiness to regret and sorrow, and she wondered what it was about this that made her feel slightly warm. I lost you once in my timeline, hit him. Chan, a small blush appears on her face when she hears the suffix when I was captured by that man and another Uchiha T. They were preparing to extract you and seal you into a demonic statue in order to revive the juvie, but I created a seal to traverse the effects and I ended up absorbing the spirits of the other 8 including you. I also absorbed Madara's and the other Uchiha's souls and powers into my being, gaining this. He closes his eyes and opens them again, revealing a pair of red eyes with a 6-bladed shuriken on the outside and a hexagonal star shape on the inside. Her eyes widened in shock as she looked into the eyes that Madareki had, only they weren't filled with malice, hatred and evil, they were filled with compassion, kindness and love. The aura she sensed from those eyes was one of protection. In my time we fell in love and I had created a seal that would have set you free, which I just currently used. I'm also in a way the new Jubi, since its power and soul is now a part of me, and I am also in some sense immortal. I know you are different from the Hitomi I knew and loved, but regardless of that I have granted you the same thing. Whether we fall in love or not is up to you, but I won't let Madara, his organization, capture you or the other vessels. And their biz eyes returned to normal and he chonged his mindscape into a beautiful forest and a house similar to the one he created from the future. I will protect you, Hitomi no Yoko, and I will kill Madara-chia, he swore. She just looks up at him for a while and then lets out a chuckle and she smiles. This must have been the reason why my future self fell in love with you. You have the desire to protect everyone, even those who despise you, for containing me. I'll hold you in regards to freeing me of the kid, and when you do well I'll leave that to your imagination, she says in the sultry tone and kisses him on the lips, and he returns it after that. Stop, and Kairabi gives him a look of lust. I can't wait till you free me, my future mate, she says, and then he vanishes from his mindscape. Outside his mindscape, a smile appears on Naruto's face and then he opens his eyes. I will not let the Akatsuki win this time, he vows, and looks down at the sleepy ing form of his sister and strokes her hair. Kakashi, Anko, Yugao and Rin were looking out for the root Anbu, and that was when Kushina and Jerry appeared. Yuria was unharmed, but Kushina had blood on her flak jacket and her sword. She flicks the blood off her sword and removes the flak jacket, then burns it. With a dot, Naruto sees this and slowly gets up, putting Shinku on his back and carrying her piggyback style. He places his arms around her legs so that she doesn't fall off and walks towards his godfather and mother with his sleeping Amato on his back. Are you okay, Kasen Hiro Senin, he asks, and Kishina smiles and nods while his eye twitches from the name. Yes, we're fine, Naruto. Come. She then looks at Kakashi and the three Kunoichi. Well, let's get going everyone, she says, and they cross the border to Kaminari no Kuni. While taking the path to Kumo, Naruto couldn't help but wonder how his presence in this time would affect it, but now all he cared about was being with his family and starting a life away from Konoha. Kamajika was without a doubt a beautiful place despite being a little colder than Konoha. The skies were as clear as day, mountains practically rose into the sky surrounded by clouds, and the rivers and lakes were as clear as day. Different varieties of birds soared through the sky while Kishina, Jiraiya and the others walked on the path that was routed to Kumagakure. Naruto was currently carrying Shinku on his back while she was playing with his hair and giggling. Naruto's brow kept twitching. The whole trip Rin was watching and was inwardly squealing kawi at this. The Shina had to hold in her laugh as she saw Sachi's brought which at Shinku playing with his hair. Baraya nudged Kushina on the shoulder, getting her attention and speaking to her quietly. So Kushina, when do you plan on training? Squirts the toad sage asks. Little did he know Naruto was listening to this with his enhanced hearing and was smirking. They already had the knowledge of all that he learned from Jiraiya during his training trip and the ones he gained from the Uchihas from his time. Once he's strong enough, he'll make You're that Madara, the Akatsuki, Hirachimaru, Danzo and everyone else who is a threat to him and his loved ones die and have a one-on-one meeting with the Shinigami before going to hell. I will not let them win this time, Madara. Chia, you better pray we don't meet soon, because if we do, you're the first one I kill, he thought as his eyes flashed to the eternal Manjikucha Ringen for a few seconds and back to his normal eyes. He then felt a small fist bop him on the head lightly and he turned around to see Shinku grinning at him. Am I too heavy for you, and Nikki, she asks, and a small smirk appears on his face. And he shakes his head. No, not really, though you do need to cut back on the dango Amato, he said with a cheeky grin on his face. Shinku gasps and then stretches out his cheeks with her fingers and he cries out in pain, getting everyone's attention. Are you calling me fat? She yells at him. They all sweat drop at this while tears go down Naruto's face from the pain of having his cheek stretched out. Kushina giggles at this until her eyes widen and she draws her sword, as do Kakashi, Yugao, Rin and Anko. Come on out and Busan, she says, and that was when 6 Kumonbu jumped out of the trees and in Fr. Onto the 8 travelers, the one wearing a lion mask and a silver white-headed cloak walked forward. We didn't come here to fight, aka no shy Red Death. We wish to know why you, jury of the salmon for Konohanbu and 2 children, are in Kaminari territory, he asked, and that was when Juris spoke up. We're here to see temporary asylum in Kumagakure and would like an audience with the wreckage about it, he answers, while Kushina and the former Konoha and Busheth their swords. The leader eyes them for a while and then speaks up. Is there a reason why you want a temporary asylum in Kumo? She asks Tashina Lts her head to her son and daughter. Yes, from Konoha and for my children, she says, and he looks over at the blonde boy and redheaded female. I see. I'll inform the guards at the gate to let you pass as well as Rakajama, but you might want to seal away your weapons as a warning, he says, and they shunshin way. The Shina lets out a sigh of relief and then walks over to Naruto and Shinku, who was getting off her brother's back. Kakashi seals away their weapons into a scroll and Kushina picks up her 2 children holding them in each arm and they head towards Kamavika Rockage Tower. Sitting in his FFICE doing paperwork while doing arm curl-ups with a large dumbbell was beyond a breakage. He is a tall dark-skinned man with a large muscular build, slick back white hair with a yellow tint, a few wrinkles and a small mustache and beard. He wore the cage hat and robes without a shirt underneath wick. Further displays his bulky physique. He has black shuriken tattooed on both shoulders. On each wrist he has gold bangle bracelets which seem to have protrusions, and has a gold belt on his waist with a lion's face engraved in the center. All of these aspects combined give him the appearance of a professional wrestler. As he was on the last piece of paperwork, his secretary walks in and bows Ray Kahama. There's a group of people here who wish to have an audience with you, she says, and he drops the dumbbell out of his left hand and it hits the ground with a metallic thud. He looks up at the woman with a raised eyebrow. And who are they, he asks, and she speaks up, the area of the salmon and the aka no shy. The rest seem to be Konohan in and have 2 kids with them, she answers, and his eyes widen as he hears the names Garaya and aka no shy. Send them in, he orders, and she nods, leaving out the door to inform them. The door opens and Jiraiya, Kishina and the others enter the office, and the wreckage stops writing and looks at them. So tell me, what do the salmon and the Akano Shai want with my village, he asks, and Kishina speaks up, breakage. Zama, me and a group who are loyal to my family wish to have a temporary asylum in Kamajika, she answers, and the man's eyes widen a little before they return to normal. Is that so? Why should I even offer you all asylum here? What is it that you and your group can offer me? Is the cage of the village, he asks as he places his hands together while laying them. The Shina closes her eyes for a moment, then opens them. Tell me, Reiki Zama, you have 2 living here in the village, right? I believe one is your brother and the other is your adopted daughter. Kurabi, container of the Hachibi, and Yujido Nai, container of the Nibi, correct, she asks, and he nearly falls out of his seat and looks at her in shock. How do you know this, he asks, and she tilts her eyes over to Jiraiya, who was smirking. He looks at the toad sage and chuckles. I see, but what does my brother and Yugi have to do with your group, he asks, and she lets out a sigh and brushes her red hair back. My son is the container F. Or the Kai Ruby no Kitsun, she answers, and his eyes were now the size of saucers. Naruto walked forward and looked at the large man with no hint of fear in his eyes. The wreckage analyzes the kid, wondering why he wasn't nervous by his appearance, but then shakes it off and looks back Kishina and notices a smaller Reedit who was behind her brother and looking over his shoulder. He then looks up at Kishina. Are they the children of the Karoi Senku monotonamic is also, he asks, while the 4 former Anbu stiffened at this until the man chuckles. Don't worry, I hold no ill intentions like that fool of Atsuki. Hikich, does I actually respect your husband's power, and to think that he went head to head with the most powerful of the 9. Tell me how your son is treated in Konoha, he asks, and she frowns and looks at her son with sorrow in her eyes. He sees this and sighs. So they praise the father and damn the s. Unday, I never would have thought the so-called strongest village in the shinobi world would sink solo, he says, and looks up at Kishina, who looks back at him and speaks again. We, meaning me, Kakashi, Haddock, Enko, Midarashi, Rin and Yazuka and Yuga Yazuki, would like to work his freelance nin for Eureka Zama. The same goes for my children when they're old enough, she answers. He looks at the 4 former Black Ops who nod, and he lets out at him and thinks for a while. The son of the Here I Know Kiba, the former apprentice of Orochimaru and Inuzuka Akinwaichi, and the heirs of the Karoi Senku and aka no Shai. I'd be a fool not to let them join, even if it's only temporary. After all, Kano has lost his Kumo's gain, he thought, and then looked at them with a small smile. Very well, Kushina-san, I will allow you and your group to stay in Kumo and work as a freelance nin for us, he says, and a smile appears on her face. I only ask you of this, he says, and she raises an eyebrow at him. And what would that be, Rikidзama, she asks. I would like to train the boy personally and have my brother teach him how to use the power he contains, he answers, getting a shocked look from her and the others. I'll consider your offer, but I want them to get the basics down first before they do any serious training. Do you understand my reasons correctly, she asks. He just laughs and waves at her. Yes, I do. Since you and your group want to work as freelance nin for my village, what mission ranks will you all accept, he asks. Bans Bank Missio. NS that consist of espionage, tracking and assassination. Those are what we specialize in. Kishina answers and he nods. He was about to speak up until the door was kicked open and a man who looked like a younger version of E walked in. He was a 6'5" dark-skinned man with a muscular build as well as white hair and a beard. On his right shoulder he has a tattoo that says iron, and on his left cheek he has a tattoo of a bull's horn. He also wore oval-shaped sunglasses and a white-colored forehead protector. He also wears a white-colored one strap over one shoulder flak jacket of a Ka Magic Min with a red RO. Pay tied around his waist, white handbands, black pants and sandals, and a white scarf around his neck. He also carries 7 swords on his back. He was Karabi Killer B, a shinobi of Kumajika and the ginger cricket of the 8-tailed giant hawks. Harabi walked in with a huge grin on his face. Big bro, big bro, what's happening yo here? Apps getting sweat drops from the former men of Konoha and Shinku. Naruto was inwardly groaning because the Karabi in this time was the same as the one from the future. Couldn't drive and was very obnoxious, but he was without a doubt the one person you don't want to FA. CE 1-on-1. He smacked his forehead while letting out a groan. Garabi, what do you want now? If it's another vacation request then the answer is no, he says when his brother gets ready to speak up but then slumps his shoulders. I'll come on big bro, cut me some slack yo, I've been spending the last month training little Yujito. He whines until he gets kicked into the back of his head by a 9-year-old blonde who had blonde hair that was tied into a ponytail and wore a purple short-sleeve shirt and gray pants with purple shinobi sandals. She was Eugene the Jinchuriki for the Nibino Nakamata. Karabi just stood there scratching his cheek with one finger while Yujito landed on the ground and glared at the man. Karabi turns around and sees the female blonde glaring at him with her blue slitted eyes. Oh hey kitty cat, he says, causing a tick mark to appear on her head. Don't call me that. Why did you leave me wandering the cave for 3 hours? She yells at him while the sweat drops on the others' heads become bigger. Call it a survival training kitty. Besides, you would have found your way out due to your heightened senses, they responded while she growled at him but then noticed the other people in the room staring at them and she blushed in embarrassment. Hey bro, what's aka no shy Tobson and Ambu doing here? He asks, pointing to them. They're here to work as freelance nin for our village, he replies, and Karabi looks at them and then back at Nada with a raised eyebrow. So the kid contains the foxa interesti he says as he looks at Naruto, who looks back at him. And you contain the ox, Naruto replies, and Karabi laughs at him. Hey, the kids got spunk bro. Oyujito, introduce yourself to them, I says as Eugene walks up to the 6-year-old and they look at each other for a while. You're short for a boy, she says. With a cheeky grin on her face and Naruto's eye twitches. I'm 6, of course I'm short kitty-chan, he says while her eye twitches too, and Nikki Shinku whines while the grown-ups watch this. After that, Jiraiya leaves to go check on his fine network while Lee gives them a 2-story house that was near the Mo. Nt Ains in a large lake connected to a river. Once they settled in Kishina Anko Yugao Rin, and Kakashi unsealed everything she took from her former home and set the house up. Shinku was sleeping on a bed while Naruto was sleeping on the other one. In his mindscape, Naruto's older form was sitting on a BD with Hitomi, who's in her hybrid form, resting her head on his lap while rubbing the back of her right ear, getting a purr out of her while he chuckles. You know your future self loved getting scratched behind her ear also, and I can see why, he says while her purr became a little louder. Less stalking or scratching, she mumbled out while he chuckled. Whatever you say Bar-chan, he draws out, and one of her tails brush against his neck. So when do I get my freedom, or do I have to earn it, she asks as she sat up and wrapped one of her tails around his waist and gave him a view of her cleavage. Naruto chuck Cleese, and from behind his body a yellow tail appeared from behind his back and placed the tip of it under her chin and gently pulled her face forward until she was a few inches away from his face. The small blush appeared on her face as Naruto leaned over into her ear and whispered into it. Her eyes widened and her blush became bigger as she shivered as he kept talking into her, then moved away from her ear and looked at her frozen yet blushing face. Naruto raised an eyebrow at this and then he snapped his fingers in front of her face and she blinked a couple of times, she says, only to see a NNING Naruto chuckling at her and she huffs and puffs her cheeks out at him. Pervert anyway, how do you plan to free me, she asks, but then starts to purr again when Naruto rubs her behind the ear. Simple, he says with a grin on his face, and then he places his index and middle finger on the collared seal on her neck and removes his other hand from behind her ear. He then performs a series of one-handed seals with his right hand and stops at the ram seal. The collar seal around her neck blows a bluish-white color. Viewing Jutsu Tenma Tohoku Gakuin Kai sealing Jutsu Demon Imprisonment Seal. Release the mo. There's out and the seal suddenly vanishes and a bead of sweat drops from his brow. Naruto lets out a sigh of relief, and that was when Hitomi tackles him on the bed, and before he could say anything she locks lips with him and his eyes widen in shock. She then releases the kiss and smiles at him. That was to free me of the seal, but you're a little older. I'll give you my thanks, she says with a grin on her face while Naruto just blinks and fades from his mindscape with Hitomi giggling. Naruto wakes up with a blush on his face and mumbles about perverted vixens. He looks at his 6-year-old form and lets out a sigh. Guess I'll have to wait until I turn 14. Damn it, I hate time traveling. Well, at least I still have the knowledge on the things I know in the future, and I know the secret to the shadow clone. He mutters to himself until he hears the door open and Kakashi walks in wearing an all-black Onin outfit with a silver flak jacket. The copy nin looks and sees Naruto staring at him, and the blonde grins. Hey Kakashi, nice-san, Naruto says, and Kakashi responds with an eye smile on his face. Hey Italian, finished sleeping, he asks, and the blonde nods. Yep. Where's Kassen and the others, he asks as he jumps off of the bed and walks towards the man, adding some supplies for the house. While I look after you two, he answers. Oh hey nice, and when Shinku awakens, can you teach us how to use chakra, Naruto asks while Kakashi's eye widens and he rubs his chin and thought, I'm sure, why not, we'll wait for Shinku t. Oh, wake up before we start, he says, and Naruto nods. 30 minutes later, Shiku wakes up and jumps out of the bed while rubbing her right eye. She walks out of the room to see Kakashi reading an orange book while her brother was twirling a fake shuriken on his finger. Takashi looks up from his book and sees the repeat walking towards him. Did you have a nice nap, Takashi asks, and she nods. Guess what, I'm gonna be teaching you and your brother some of the basics of being a shinobi and how to use chakra, he said, getting a shocked look from the chibi repeat. Shinku then squealed and blumped Kakashi's leg. The sea Ashu chuckles at this and pets her on the head when she lets go. Come on you three, let's head outside, he said, and motioned them to follow him, and they did. The Shina, Rin, Anko and Yuga were heading back to the house while carrying bags of groceries. They managed to make it back to the house and enter the front door. When they walked into the kitchen, they realized the Kakashi, Naruto and Shinku were not in the house, so they ran around back to see Kakashi showing them a series of hand seals. Shinku was blinking and tried to mimic Kakashi's hand motions. She messes up on the board sign, but surprising why Naruto was able to get them all down, and then he starts to increase the pace a little. After he gets all 12 down, Shinku pouts at this and Naruto looks over at her and tries to hold in a laugh, as does Kakashi, but she glares at Kakashi, who looks the other way. Naruto then sits in front of Shinku. Here will help you with the seals, he says, and Naruto shows her the seals in a slow pace and she does the same. The cash, she watches the siblings work on the hand seals, and when Shinku manages to get them all down without messing up, she cheers and hugs her Nikki, who was turning blue. The Kashi was chuck ling at the sight, as were the four Kunoichi. Ahem. Kishina coughs out loud, getting Kakashi's and the twins' attention. Takashi rubs the back of his neck nervously. Oh hey Kishina-san, I was just teaching the kids some shinobi basics and hand seals, I hope you don't mind, he said, praying that she wouldn't hurt him, but all she did was shrug and smile. That's okay Kakashi, as long as you don't teach them anything dangerous, otherwise I'd have to end your life as a male, she says, while the Cyclops pales and starts to sweat bullets. Naruto didn't show it but was sweating bullets on the inside. Man, now I see why the males in the Nara clan are afraid of their wives, he thought, while in Konoha Shikaku sneezed and mumbled trouble only to get hit in the head with a frying pan. That was when Yugao spoke up. The Shina senpai, I know you plan on teaching Shinku and Naruto, but may I teach them the basics in a few years? Shish. E asks yes and say I want to teach the Gakis too. Anko asks with a grin on her face. Me too. Rin cries out. They then appear in front of Kushina using the puppy's eyes. The reedied sweat drops and lets out a sigh. Fine, you can train them, she answers while they squeal and do a group hug with Kushina, who was in the middle and turned blue. See, can't breathe, she squeaked out while her children laughed at a predicament 8 years later. But Naruto and Shinku turned 7. Kakashi taught them how to throw kunai and shuriken and chakra control like the tree climbing exercise and water walking. He also taught how to compress their chakra and become undetected. When they turned 8, Anko and Yugao started to teach them the academics as well as how to set traps and some survival skills like hunting. Yugao then taught them the basics and amazingly they both adapted well to it. When they turned 9, Rin taught them the basics on human anatomy, a yijutsu medical jutsu like the mystic palm and chakra scalpels and poison extraction. She also taught them how to attack certain parts of the human body as well as how to treat injuries. When they turned 10, Kakashi decided to check them for their elemental affinity. Why shockingly Shinku had 3 and they were wind, water and fire. Naruto to everyone's shock had 4 affinities. They were wind, water, lightning and fire. The Shina knew mostly wind and water, so she taught them both a few D and C ranks for said elements. Kakashi taught Naruto some low-level lightning and D fire while Yugo and Anko taught Shinku some fire. They knew the two siblings also met Kari Samueli and Amoy who were genin and were trained by Kurabi. Said container taught Naruto how to use his Bijuu's chakra, so everyone knows Naruto is actually using the Jubi chakra he gained when absorbing the Demon Soul. When the from the future became the Jubi Soul, he taught Naruto some lightning as well as his form of fighting. But Naruto and Shinku turned 11, Juris showed up and taught them some of his personal jutsu like the Harijizo Yomi Numa and got them started in learning Fu and Jutsu due to knowledge on Fionjutsu Naruto had from the future. He managed to get the basics down. The area was shocked with how well Naruto's and Shinku's skills were. It was as if they were adapted to knowing the sealing arts like their father. They took most beginners a long time to understand the concepts, but both Naruto and Shinku learned it without difficulty and even started to create their personal stories. They also let the twins sign the Toad contract and Kushina had them signed a Hydra contract, a contract that belonged to her clan in Whirlpool before it was destroyed. So far they could each summon a horse-sized frog and hydrant. One time Shinku summoned a saltwater crocodile and Naruto summoned a Komodo dragon, shocking both cage-level nins since you needed level chakra control in order to summon them. That was due to all the physical and chakra exercises Kakashi, Yugao and Anko made them do, and the same went for Naruto when he trained with he and Karabi. When the two turned 12, Kushina taught them her sword-style Shikuchi and Jiraiya decided to teach Naruto and Shinku the Rasengan. Naruto got it down in less than a week, but it took Shinku 2 weeks. But Naruto how her understand the steps and she was able to make it. Naruto was also working on something similar to the Hiraishin. The only difference was that it was based on pure speed and not a kunai. When they turned 13, the twins were at Itachi's level when he was 13. Naruto's skill level in the ninja arts were already at mid-ambu level and Shinku was at a high drowning level, sitting in a lotus position in the middle of the lake surface with his eyes closed was Naruto Zamakinamicus. He was now 14 years old, 5 feet 7 and was wearing a black sleeveless muscle shirt and blue cargo pants that had a silver lining going down it and wore a pair of Anbu-styled sandals. He also wore a pair of fingerless gloves that had metal pads on them. He was now like a teenage version of his father, but the only difference was his slitted blue eyes and he had fangs jutting from his upper lip. He also wore a black headband that had a metal piece attached to it and it had the symbol of a whirlpool on it. His eyes snapped open and he instantly leapt up in his feet and jumped out of the lake when he saw 4 black snakes shoot out of the water and head for him with their mouths open. Revealing their fangs, Naruto bit his thumb and swiped his left wrist, which had a containment seal on it. The small puff of smoke is seen and the ninjutsu appears in his right hand. He then places it in a reversal position. When the snakes are close enough, he spins, performing a counterclockwise lash and slices the snakes apart and he flips again in mid-air, landing in the water in a crouched position. As the snakes fall into the water, he then twists his body to deflect a barrage of kunai that were headed towards him, and he then pulls out one silver throwing knife and flings it in order to deflect a shish Yuriken. He runs towards the throwing knife he threw and catches it. He places the knife back in the pouch he had latched to his back and grabs the shuriken. The yellow blur was seen heading for him from behind, and Naruto threw the shuriken at the blur, which moved to the right and kept charging Naruto. Lance the ninjutsu on the ground and leaned back as a fist came for his head but missed and passed by. It was Eugene. She is 17 years old now and her attire was different. Her hair was longer and tied into a ponytail. She also wore a silver and black shirt that hugged the curves in her body and showed off her developing D-cuffed breasts. She wore a pair of tight black pants with purple sandals and wore fingerless gloves. On her head was a Kumo headband. Ever since Naruto started to train with Kurabi, the two started off as friends, but when got older she teased him about checking her out when he inks she isn't looking, and Naruto just flirted back, calling her Kitty-chan, which ticks her off a lot even though she contained the Nibi. What was even better was that he, Shinku and Yujito always pulled pranks on the Rikage in the village just alive in the place up, even though Naruto was a lot more serious than he was in his time. He was still a prankster at heart, with Yuria and Kakashi being the main victims of his pranks. Naruto then grabs her outstretched hand, shocking her, and twists his body around and behind her and presses her arm behind her back. He then wraps his other arm around her neck and applies pressure to it, getting a gurgle from the blonde. He then smells her hair while she struggles in his grip, only to wince when he squeezes her wrist tighter. Guava berry Yugi-chan man, he asks Yujito's marks too, and then she pushes backward, adding her weight to his, and they both hit the ground. This causes Naruto to let out a grunt and loosen his grip on her. Yujito flips backwards and lands on her feet. Naruto flips back on his feet, and with a tug of his finger the ninjutsu is back in his hand and he twirls it for a while before charging at Yujito with his sword poised in a stabbing pose. Ion Vegeta reaches in the back of her two pouches and pulls out a pair of gauntlets that have 3 jagged claws attached to them. She charges at him too, and both swing their weapons at each other, playing. The blades clashed and grinded against one another, sending sparks everywhere. Yujito smirks and Hen swings her left clawed hand at the blonde. Naruto sees this and then jumps over the attack and uses her arm as a spring and kicks her in the back while landing on the other side. The redhead, who was wearing a black and red outfit like her mother and seemed to be the same age as Naruto, appears, but he him and goes for a roundhouse kick. Naruto ducks and does a sweep kick at her other leg, and it makes contact, causing her to fall towards the ground, but she plants her arm on the ground and then twirls in midair, landing back on her feet, charges at Naruto again and swings her clawed arms at the blonde, who sidesteps her, and she then sends a kick to his head. Naruto blocks it with his left arm, and Shinku, who has a kodachi with a black hilt with red diamonds on it, does a horizontal slash at his back. When she slashes him across the back, he disappears in a puff of smoke and replaces himself with Al. Shocking both girls, said blonde grabbed Shinku by the back of her jacket and swung her around violently and slams her into the ground, getting a grunt from the girl, and then palm strikes Yujito in the stomach, getting an arm from the girl, who is since getting backwards. Naruto then pulls out 3K Unai and throws them at Shinku, whose eyes widen in horror, and she leaps off the ground while the weapons hit the ground. She then felt a tug on her heel, and the next thing she knew, she was caught in a net and started to struggle. Naruto grins at this. One down, he says, and dodges to the side when a beam of yellow lightning misses him but scorches his cheek a little. Yujito appears behind him with a kunai near his throat, and she smiles. Naruto frowns at this, but Yujito grins. Gotcha, Foxy, __. She says, only for her eyes to widen when Naruto dissolves into water and feels one arm wrap around her waist and the blade of a throwing knife near her neck. No, Kitty-chan, I have you, he says as he holds her even closer, getting a small blush from the older blonde. Hoi and Nikki, get me out of this net, Shinku calls out. Naruto points the blade he headed Yugi's neck towards the rope Shinku was ensnared in. He throws it with a flick of his wrist and it cuts one of the lines resulting in the reed falling out of the net and landing on her feet. Naruto then wraps both hands around Yujito's waist and rests his head on her shoulder making the girls blush even more. Shinku walks towards the two blondes and sighs, "We almost had you that time." "And Nikki," she says, sheathing her sword and placing her hands on her hips. Naruto chuckles and says, "Almost doesn't count." He replies while she "Whatever, I'm going home to get something to eat. You two are coming, or are you going to stay there holding your Cheetos?" she asks while Naruto smirks. "Yep," he says, and Yugi's eyes widen. Shinku shrugs at his answer. "Okay, bye then," she says, and disappears into a swirl of water. The blush Yujito's face remained there while keeps his head on her shoulder. Yujito lets out a sigh as he sits down with her in his arms. "You came close to catching me again, Yujito-chan. Then again, you are the youngest in the village," he says while she chuckles. "True, but why can't I catch you?" she asks. "Because Yugi foxes are tricksters," he says, and kisses her cheek. Yugi lets out a small grunt and places her arms over his while lying back on his chest. A smile then appears on her face. "I bet you Samui is complaining about her neck and back hurting and wants you to give her a massage," she says while Naruto laughs. "Probably so. Why do you want one?" he asks, and she shakes her head. "Nope, I'm fine," she says. "You're a lying kitten. You want him to give you one of those heavenly massages, or did you forget that I can hear your thoughts?" Nibby asks her to blush. The vessel shut up, Nibby, she screams into her mind while the two-tailed cat giggles. "It's not my fault you want the blonde fox. What's this, an image of Naruto-kun stripping you down to your underwear and taking you as one of his? Shut up and stop looking at my private thoughts," she roared at the now meowing demon cat. Naruto saw how red her face was and spoke up. "As need be telling you to get in my pants again?" Naruto asks for a nod from the blonde female and he lets out a laugh. "Tempting, aren't I?" he asks her, and she scoffs and caresses his right cheek making Naruto purr little as he grabs her hand. "Please don't do that, Yugi," he says while she smirks. Naruto then tickles her sides and she giggles. "Okay, I'm sorry," she says, and he stops. He then lets go of her while getting up and helps her up. "Will I have to go to Naruto? Come, maybe next time we can do more than cuddle," she says and poses for the blonde. Naruto chuckles and then kisses her on the lips while she returns it. After that she sunshines away and Naruto vanishes in a swirl of white fire. Namika's compound. Naruto appeared in the house and saw Akashi, who was sitting on the couch watching an action movie on the flat-screen TV with his arm wrapped around Rin, who was sleeping on his chest. Shinku was in the kitchen eating an apple. He walked upstairs and then went into his room after unsealing all of his weapons, his headband and removing his W-8s and sandals. He fell back onto his bed and shut his eyes. He then feels an odd weight on top of him, and when he opens his eyes he sees a pair of red slitted ones staring at him and grinning. It was Atomi. She was wearing a sleeveless black tank top that hugged her heartless figure and a pair of reddish-orange shorts. "Hey Naruto, come that I disturb you?" she asks while tilting her head to the side. A smile appeared on Naruto's face because she looked cute when she did that. "No, not really. So what do you want?" he asks her, and the pout appears on her face. "I want to snuggle. Being in that mansion inside your mindscape is boring and I have no one to scratch my ears or pet my tails. Please, I'm lonely," she pleads and pulls the puppy's eyes. Naruto snickers and odds getting a fox-like grin from Hitomi. "Yay, I get to cuddle with my foxy. Come," she says and wraps her arms around his waist and rests her head on his chest. Naruto wraps an arm around her and scratches her behind her ear, getting a purr from Hitomi. It then moves her head near the crook of his neck. Naruto then closes his eyes and falls asleep. A few hours later, Kushina was walking down the hallway towards Naruto's room and turned the no. When she opens the door and looks inside, she sees her son sitting on his bed Indian style with a red fox that was curled up into his lap purring as he struck her back while wagging her tail, which meant she was happy. "Naruto-kun, where did you get that fox?" Kushina asks while her son looks up at her. "He followed me home, and when I tried to get her to go back into the wild she just wouldn't leave my side, so I just let her come home with me," he said. Well, the fox sits up and stretches. She then sees Kushina and yips. "Though say hi to Mama Hitomi," he says. The fox leaps off of his lap and runs towards Ka. She then stops in front of the reeded and stares at the older reeded. Kushina crouches down and reaches out to rub the fox behind her ear. The fox lets out a happy hip and then licks her hand, getting a smile from the reeded. While she is cute, she says, and scoops Atami into her arms, and the fox starts to lick her cheek, making Kushina giggle. She then sets Hitomi down, who was smiling at the reeded. "Oh Naruto, the Rockage wants you and Shinku to patrol the shores of Kamajika for 3 days," she says, and the blonde nods. "Okay, I'll get my stuff ready." "Does Shinku already know?" he asks, and she nods. Naruto then gets up and gets his supplies ready. After he finished that, he walked downstairs with a backpack and duffel bag, and Hitomi was wrapped around his neck like a scarf. He sees Shinku, who had her gear ready, and raises an eyebrow at the living scarf on his neck. "What's with the fox and Nikki?" she asks, pointing to the wagging tail. "She followed me home." "So you're ready?" he asks, and gets a nod from his sister. "See a Kakashi Nazen," the siblings called out while the man waves without looking at them. The two then away while Rin moans and snuggle into the man's chest while he holds her even closer. Meanwhile, a yellow and red blur was racing to the shores of. While this was happening, Shinku spoke up. "Hey Nikki, how far are you with your new technique?" she asks. "Not as far as I hope. I can only use it 25 times before tiring." "Why?" he asks, and she blinks. "Wow, that's actually good," she says, as they leapt over large rocks that were in a river. After running for 3 hours and checking with them at one of the patrol bases, Naruto and Shinku set up their camp near the shore and kept a calm link and talked with him as they went in separate directions. They also created some cage bushings, Komodo dragons and crocodiles to patrol the waters and lower levels. Naruto was currently leaping through tree branches and looking in different directions for any intruders. Naruto then tilts the small microphone near his mouth and speaks up. "Hey Shinku, have you noticed anything suspicious yet over?" he asks through the link. He hears some static in his ears and hears a feminine voice. "No Naruto, I haven't." "What about you over?" she asks, and he shakes his head. "Nothing yet," he says while leaping through the trees. He then lands near a cliff where the shores are and watches the waves hit the sand. He then notices long red, rusted hair and a body sweeping into the sand. His eyes widen and he leaps off the cliff and skids down the rocky edge until he hits the soft sand. He then runs towards the shore where the body was. When he's close enough to the body, he turns it over and his eyes widen when he realizes who this is. Chan, he whispers to himself. Her outfit was torn in some places and she had some cuts and bruises and was wearing a metal plate that had the symbol on it on her left shoulder blade. He then places his head near her chest to check her heart rate. It was slow, but she was alive, but she wasn't breathing. Naruto clicks the red button on his walkie-talkie and speaks into his comm link. "Shinku hits me. I found an unconscious Kunoichi from Korega washed up on the shores and she is still alive but barely. I need you to go to the closest tower and have a medical team come to my location," he says, and she speaks. "Hi, where's your location in Nikki?" she asks, and he speaks up. "I'm in the northeastern section of the shoreline and 7 miles from our camp." Over, he replies. "Okay, I'm heading to the base now to get the medical squad. Keep her alive until we get there." "Over and out," she says. Naruto's eyes and unzips her flak jacket and is thanking Kami that she was wearing a mesh shirt under it because he couldn't keep his gaze off her chest. He then shakes his head to clear the thoughts out. The prize, her mouth opened carefully, and places his hands over her chest to perform CPR and presses down on it a couple of times and then locks lips with her to get air into her lungs. He stops and presses his head near her chest but doesn't hear anything. He then continues the process a few more times, and after the third time of breathing air into her lungs, he quickly removes his head away from hers and she splutters and ughs out a lot of salt water while sucking in oxygen. He helps her sit up and rubs her back while she takes in more air. His hand blows green and the chakra was healing her lungs so she doesn't strain herself while taking in air. Her breathing becomes normal but she collapses into his arms while he holds onto her. He then gets up while holding her bridal style. He turns to see Shinku and 3 Ambu medics coming towards him. He walks towards them until they are a few feet from him. "I managed to heal her lungs, but we need to take her back to our camp so she can get more treatment," he says to them, and they nod. They then